The following program was produced by an independent community producer. The opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of the ECAT staff or board of directors.
Giving a voice to the voiceless, pulling stories out of the shadows and putting them under the spotlight, making sure that each person is valued and cared for. This is Humanity First with Peter Evers, presented by BAMSI.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Humanity First. My name is Peter Evers, and I have the privilege to work at BAMSI, one of Brockton's local human services providers. This week, we're going to talk about a couple of things, and we have a very special guest that's going to be coming on in a few minutes. It is Courtney Rodrigues, who works for BAMSI. And she's going to talk about the system, the childcare system, and surviving the system. She has an amazing story of going through the foster care system and finding a pathway for herself. Oftentimes we talk in this field about the disturbing results of many children who come out of that system. But this system is also based on hope and resilience, as far as I'm concerned. And the idea of telling stories about success, the success and the resilience and the capabilities of these young people is just something that gives us an awful lot of hope. But I did want to mention this week, I'm a sports fanatic and my entire family is. And it's really interesting this week because we're in the middle of the Women's World Cup and hopefully many people have been watching it. And something devastating happened on Sunday morning or Monday because the game actually happened in Australia when the US played in the round of 16 against a Swedish team that was very good. And amazingly, and to the shock of most Americans, the team were knocked out in that round, which is devastating because the women's team has been in the forefront of women's soccer for the past 25, 30 years. And there's a reason for that. And that reason can be traced back to 1972 and Title IX. And people may have heard a lot about Title IX and not be quite sure what it was. But it was a monumental moment in American history, which said that in all colleges and universities across the United States, there has to be equal treatment of men and women in all educational matters, including sporting activities. That began a transformation in this country where girls and women were allowed into competitive sports in an equal way to men. It's taken many, many years. And it just struck me as I was watching the Australian game with the United States, that it is a watershed. It is sad that the United States have been knocked out of the World Cup. The reason they have been knocked out, though, is more hopeful in the world. The US were great and good at soccer for so long because Title IX allowed them to have the same footing as men. And it's caught on in the world. The message that America has sent to the world around equality is caught on, which means that women's soccer has caught up with American soccer. They are now as athletic and skillful and capable with a soccer ball in front of them as the American team. And in that sense, America needs to get themselves ahead again. And I'm sure the US will do that with good coaching and great players coming through. But what a remarkable nod to Title IX from 1972 and the American people who have really trailed a blaze in terms of making sure that equality is for everybody. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Jamie. I'm an essential worker here at BAMSI, and I'm a nurse. Nurses are essential here at BAMSI because as nurses, we really have the opportunity to make an impact. We have very small ratios, so we have the opportunity to really learn everything about the person served and be able to give the best care. It really serves such a great purpose for me as being a nurse and really why I came into nursing. Learn more about nursing opportunities at bamsijobs.org.
Giving a voice to the voiceless, pulling stories out of the shadows and putting them under the spotlight, making sure that each person is valued and cared for. This is Humanity First with Peter Evers, presented by BAMSI.
Welcome back, everybody. And as promised a few minutes ago, here is our special guest, Courtney Rodrigues. Courtney, hi. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. As I mentioned before, Courtney is our manager of our scheduling over at BAMSI, which I will say that is one of the more difficult jobs. When you think about our organization, we have about 90 different homes all over the state of Massachusetts, many of them, of course, in Brockton area, and making sure that we have staff to cover 3 shifts every day, 21 shifts a week is a big job. And I know that sort of weighs heavy on you sometimes, Courtney, in terms of staffing issues that we have. So we really appreciate the work that the scheduling folks do. So thank you for that.
Thank you. My team does a really good job with supporting everybody. So.
That's right. And but that's not what we're here to talk about at the moment. And as I'd said at the top of the show, the work that we do in human services can be sometimes quite sad and quite miserable. And oftentimes I'm struck by when we need to tell a story about wanting funding for something or like that, you'll see a video of despair. You'll see a video of really awful things happening and that is absolutely true. That is the reality of many, many people who come through our social welfare systems, our child welfare systems. And I'm not in any way minimizing that at all. But one thing I think that brings many people through, and one thing that sustains all of us, is hope and resilience. Hope that individuals and families do get a lot of what they need in this state. Many of them don't. I would say much more than in many other states in this country that Massachusetts does devote a lot of resources to making sure there is a safety net, but that safety net isn't perfect by a long shot. And resilience. And that's principally the reason that you're here today, Courtney, because you and I have talked a lot about your journey. And your journey, well, let me throw that over to you. Your journey begins in childhood, right, with your encounter with the foster care system.
Yes. I was put into foster care around the age of 7. And then from there, I stayed in foster care and was put in group homes. There was different programs that they had that, when foster, when the workers couldn't find like regular house placements, they would put you in like residential programs just to fill the spots because they didn't have a place to put you. So I've been in those. I transitioned out to group homes after that. So I have definitely been in and out.
So just to pick up on something you said, and in full disclosure, we've talked about this, I was a DCF worker for many years, and one of my experiences was that there weren't any foster homes for young people. So we would do a removal, and then we just wouldn't have anywhere for somebody. And there were some cases in my experience where we had to drive around with young children in the car all night because we literally didn't have anywhere to put them. And that was your experience as well, right?
Yes. I mean, the emergency foster care is the one that you're talking about.
Correct.
It's hard to find placements, especially if someone's removed after like 5 p.m. when the offices are closed. So, yes, definitely. So,
as we've moved forward, that was, of course, a long time ago that I worked for the department, and not so long since you were placed. But as you look back on this experience, because you're somebody who has an enormous amount of resilience and as an internal core of strength around making sure that you can make your way in the world. Talk to me a little bit about the things that you think are missing in the foster care world. And I don't think this is a Massachusetts issue. I think it's a world issue. I think, we have real trouble supporting families and keeping them intact. And then when they do disrupt, we have real trouble giving children a chance in a home that is stable for a long period of time.
Yes, definitely. I think that one of the major things is that your goal is to place somebody in a whole house for stabilization, to make sure that they're safe, make sure that they have a place to eat, make sure that so the basic needs are met. But it gets deeper than that when kids don't transition back to their families all the time. They lose that connection that they would have with like a mother or a father that would give them guidance, that would help build natural skills that you need, especially when you get older. I think that what DCF does is amazing with helping those that definitely are in need, but there are some things that lack in that transition because they're basically not given the skills that they need, especially when you turn 18 to 21, depending on if you go back to school. If you do go to college, you are allowed to sign yourself back in till you're 21. But even then, like budgeting, basic skills like balancing a checkbook, things that, people aren't being taught in foster care. Different ethnicities need different products to use for their hair, or, and if you don't have foster parents that know these things for that child, then they're not going to teach them that. Another thing that I had mentioned was, politics and, being involved with knowing what's going on with the world and with the government. I was never really that was never really brought to my attention at such a younger age for me to focus on that until I got a little bit older and I went to college. Then I took politics. And then that I kind of got a better view of what was really going on.
So it's interesting. I'm looking at this from two different positions. One is there are things that we should be doing within the system to prepare people for life in general, right? And I would say that, it's really interesting. I would say that we're probably not doing a good job in society that way as well. There are many young people who are coming out of schools with no real preparation around, let's say, home economics, domestic science, or whatever we want to call it, or balancing a checkbook, as you mentioned before. Some of the principal issues that we're going to be dealing with as soon as we get out there in the world. You hear stories about home ec classes being done away with in school districts, and we're getting down to the bare minimum. So what are we doing in our foster care system, to our welfare system? What are we doing with kids to prepare them for that transition to adulthood?
Yeah, there's definitely a huge disconnect with that. For instance, the home ec, in foster care and being transitioned to different homes all the time, or even just being in residential, people either cooked for you or you were told what you had to eat. And so you didn't really get a chance to learn how to cook or to learn how to grocery shop. Mm-hmm. Or basic skills like that are needed. So then here you are when you're older and people are expecting you to just be able to maintain and hold on your own. It's kind of like, okay, so what do I do here? So you don't always pick the healthiest choices. If you were guided to, when you were younger, to know that, the nutritional values of the different things that you need, you might pick healthier choices. This can lead to weight gain, different problems. So I think that initially, if some of the issues and the disconnect is addressed in like the foster care system with the children at a younger age, when they get older and they do transition out, they'll be able to maneuver their way through these with their skills that they built over time. I think the inconsistency, it plays a huge factor. I think the lack of having stable homes, along with having the funding for the school systems and for other places as well, plays a huge factor. But that also plays into part of where we're putting the money that we are putting into the states. You know what I mean?
We do. And I think, one of the other things is that, and you just made me think about this, the state often fails up kids, if you know what I mean, that if a child really needs a higher intensity placement, it's oftentimes we place in 2 or 3 different foster homes, then maybe a therapeutic foster home, and then maybe a group home, and then you go into a residential, when we knew all along that child needed a specialist, but it was almost like they had to fail in all these places to get. When I worked in residential a few years ago, we did and it was actually at the Home for Little Wanderers, and we did some analysis on the kids that we had in the program. The average number of placements for the children that were in the adolescent residential program before they got to that program were 17. They had been in 17 placements in their lives. So they'd had 17 disrupted attachments over that period of time.
I've had way more than that.
Right.
I have, I've attended multiple middle schools all over Massachusetts. I've attended multiple high schools all over Massachusetts. It got to the point where my senior year, I was told that the credits that I had weren't offered at the high school I was attending at that time. So some of the credits weren't accounted for. So they were going to keep me back and make me do my senior year over again. And I wasn't doing that. So I just went and got my GED.
So this is the interesting bit, though, for me, Courtney. You are a very successful person. You are a member of our management team, our scheduling and staffing team at BAMSI. You contribute on an enormous amount to the organization. You have a plan, and we've talked about your plan a little bit. We always talk about resilience, and it's this sort of vague notion when people talk about resilience, and I've heard people say, well, if we knew what it was, we'd bottle it. But you obviously have that. You have that quality. There were many opportunities, I would imagine, where you just thought, repeat, high school. All right, I'm done. What is it? What is it within you that has allowed you to sustain yourself, to grow a family, to get qualifications, to go to college? These are all of the things that we would expect for somebody who had a normal trajectory into adulthood, and you didn't. You didn't have that normal trajectory.
So I was blessed with having guidance from somebody that was close to my mom when I was very, very young, and I still stayed in contact with him throughout the years. So I definitely had guidance from somebody that didn't have any of these experiences. So they knew how to look at life differently than I did. He wasn't brought up in a world where he grew up on survival. He kind of knew, how to, at one point, obviously he did, but as he got into his professional careers and started to really build his careers, he was able to help give me guidance. I could call him. But it really comes with just being able to not give up. I'm by far perfect, by far, and I still have numerous things that I work on every day because I can acknowledge them and say, maybe these are some of the traumas, maybe these are some of the things I need to work on from traumas and triggers from my childhood, but being able to recognize that that's what it is, and then being able to push through it and figure out how to fix it is how you can get through things. You have to be able to sit here and say, this is the problem, how do I fix it? Right. And a lot of that goes with self-evaluation as well. I had to self-evaluate myself and say, at some point, I don't want to live like this. I don't want to do this. So how do I fix it?
So you had a vision for how you wanted to be.
Yes.
Which is, I think many people have real difficulty with that when they're in the mire, when they're in the middle of that. And I think that's really important to think about. And you and I have talked about this, and I make this recommendation to anybody who will listen, but there's a guy called Steve Pemberton who wrote a book called A Chance in the World. And that book is about survival of the foster care system. And he's now the diversity officer at Walgreens, and has been wildly successful. And it just reminded me of what you said. Never underestimate the impression that you can have on a young person going out of your way to acknowledge them and to acknowledge the difficulties that they're having and give them support can be a life changer. And for Steve Pemberton, if you remember, he would sit outside his foster home because he wasn't allowed in, on the wall every day, and a neighbor started giving him books, and he began to read, and he ended up at Boston College, and he got a first. And those kind of stories are what you're referring to, Courtney. And so as we sort of wrap up, because we've got a couple of minutes left, you have big plans for the future, right? That you want to be able to sell this idea to people who are going through this at the moment. Tell me a bit about that.
So I wanted to be able to have maybe like a podcast or something where I can express my experiences, just situations that I've been through, and acknowledge the situations. That way people can get a glimpse of certain things that, can happen to children while being in foster care. And then it's not only just for foster children, but also for foster parents. Maybe they can listen and acknowledge and say, hey, I never looked at things that way. You know what I mean? The point is just to get the word out there so that there's a little bit more acknowledgement and to try to help fix something that's a little broken.
And I do think in the world that we work in, knowing somebody who can tell a story of hope and a story of success, a story of recovery, or a story of I've been through that is as important, if not more, than the clinical intervention itself. Hearing a story of success from somebody who's going through exactly what you're going through at the moment is true within the world of mental health. It's true in substance use disorder. I think it's very brave of you to do that, Courtney. I think it's very necessary. And the more people that can hear your podcast that is coming up, the better. And perhaps when it's going, we can come back and we can talk about some of those experiences.
Absolutely.
Courtney Rodrigues, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, everybody.